Hello, everyone. Tony Costa here from Toronto Apologetics. Glad that you could join us for this session. Well, we are at that time of year again. It is Valentine's Day, February the 14th. Every year comes around, and we all remember Valentine's Day. And people in relationships, whether they're married or engaged or dating, uh, Valentine's Day has become the day for romance. And a lot of folks are probably not aware of the Christian connections that Valentine's Day has. In fact, if you look at the older calendars, you will notice that February the 14th was called St. Valentine's Day. But with the secularization of this day, and of course, the secularization of society, which is moving farther and farther from its Judeo-Christian roots in the West, they dropped the term saint. And so today, the day is better known as Valentine's Day rather than St. Valentine's Day. So what I wanted to do in this brief video is I wanted to talk about this day called Valentine's Day. And I just wanted to say a little bit about how this day entered into the calendar. And I just wanted to say a little bit about who this Valentine is. When we think of Valentine or Be My Valentine, we always think in terms of romantic relationships. But it really starts with this figure in church history by the name of Saint Valentine. And the reason why February the 14th is associated with Valentine or Saint Valentine is because it is believed that he was martyred on February the 14th in the year 270, that is AD 270. And so the date of February the 14th was the presumed date of his martyrdom. Now, what makes things a little tricky about Valentine or Saint Valentine is that there were a number of people that bore that name. Apparently, that name Valentine was a well-known Latin name. It has to do with valor, the idea of being someone who has valor. And there were a number of them. And so let me just say that the origins of this person by the name of Saint Valentine is, unfortunately, it's very scanty. And we really don't have a lot of information on this person called Valentine. And so the true identity of this person has been complex. And we know that even in the year 496, we know that Pope Gelasius I called into question the person of Valentine because there's just a number of them. And so there may have been a number of people with this name who were considered Christians or leaders in the Christian church. But the origin of this day, again, is based on Valentine of Rome, the Valentine who was of the city of Rome. And he is said to have been a Christian martyr who was put to death for his faith. Now, there's a number of stories related to this. One story says that the emperor, the Roman Emperor Claudius II of Rome, were told that he oversaw persecution of the Christians in his empire. And we are told in one story that Valentine of Rome was interviewed personally by the Emperor Claudius II. And what we learn is that in this story that Claudius II was so impressed by Valentine that he offered that if Valentine converted to his pagan life, his life would be spared. He was impressed by his boldness and his courage, but he wanted him to recant Christ and convert to paganism and basically join the Roman cult, the Roman way of worship. And so instead of trying to convert to paganism, according to the story, Valentine actually tried to convert Claudius to Christianity. And this is what eventually, according to the story, earned his death penalty. And according to the story as well, prior to Valentine's execution, we're told that he allegedly performed a healing miracle for the jailer's blind daughter. So when he was imprisoned, the jailer had a daughter who was blind, and presumably Valentine, through God's intercession, interceding on behalf of this person with God's help, this jailer's blind daughter was healed. And apparently, there's a story as well that the name of this jailer's daughter was Julia, and apparently he had sent her a note while he was in prison, and he wrote it, "Your Valentine, your Valentine." Another story which has become quite popularized and which associates Valentine with love and romance is that this tradition says that Valentine, um, the Emperor Claudius had forbidden his soldiers to marry because he felt that single soldiers, he believed that single soldiers would make better soldiers. They wouldn't be committed to wives or family or children. And so he prohibited his soldiers from marrying. But of course, these soldiers were men who fell in love with women. And according to the story, Valentine performed weddings for these soldiers, and he had these clandestine weddings where he would perform these weddings in secret or in private. And then when Claudius found out about this, he had thrown Valentine into prison. And we're told that in this other story, we're told that while Valentine was in prison, we're told that he fell in love with the jailer's daughter. And prior to his execution, he's presumed to have written her a love letter signed Your Valentine. And so the tradition of saying, "Be my Valentine" or "Your Valentine" is connected to this particular story. Now, the other thing we also know is that because of the notoriety of Valentine or Saint Valentine, we know that there were relics of this supposed saint. Not saying that he wasn't a saint in Christ, but because the stories are so sketchy, there's some conflicting stories. But there's even a church in Rome, Italy, that has, presumably, they claim they have Valentine's skull. And they have this skull that they claim was Valentine's. And in the Roman Catholic tradition, there's this veneration that goes on with these relics. These are bodily remains of the saints. And so they have this particular skull in Rome. And I'm not speaking towards whether or not this is authentic. I personally don't think it is authentic. But this is a normal practice in the Roman Catholic Church and in the Eastern Orthodox Church of holding the bodily remains, parts of bodily remains of the saints. Now, the one who really made this whole idea of, as I said, writing cards from your Valentine, as I said, this is based on the tradition that Valentine fell in love with the jailer's daughter, and he sent her this love letter and signed it from your Valentine. But really, the person that we generally hear from the critics, the average critic is the person that will attack Valentine's Day as a pagan holiday, that it was taken from the pagans. Well, the Romans had this feast day called the Lupercalia. The Lupercalia, the word Lupercalia is associated with the word for wolf. And there's a lot of tradition behind the wolf because the founders of Rome, Romulus and Remus, they are believed to have been the founders of Rome. According to legend, they were abandoned by their family into a forest, and allegedly a wolf, a female wolf, a she-wolf, nursed them. And so these two children, instead of being devoured by this wolf, they were nourished, and they were raised, if you will, taken care of, nursed by this she-wolf, this female wolf. And so if you look at Romulus and Remus, there's famous statues of the wolf nursing these children. Well, the word Lupercalia comes from the word again for wolf, and we know that in pagan Rome, every February they would hold this feast called Lupercalia. Now, the Christians did not copy this pagan feast and call it St. Valentine's Day because February the 14th was believed to have been the date of his martyrdom. So it wasn't because they were copying the pagans. And besides, the Lupercalia was celebrated on the 15th of February. So February the 15th would be the time in which they would celebrate this Roman pagan festival called Lupercalia. And the very word that we get for the month of February, the word February does come from a Latin word, februa, F-E-B-R-U-A, and the word februa carries the idea of purification and cleansing. And so it was on this date, February the 15th, when there was the full moon, that people were ritually cleansed or ritually washed. And it coincided as well with the Lupercalia. And what they would do is the men would run through the streets, sometimes stark naked, and they would have straps of hides from a goat or a dog. And what they would do is they would run through the streets and they would whip women with these straps of goat hide. And the idea was they would whip them in order to entice them into relationships. And so we need to understand that Valentine's Day was not a copy from this. And some people have suggested maybe the church declared February 14th, St. Valentine's Day, to countenance this cult. No, that's not the reason why. The reason was it was believed that it was on that date, February the 14th, that Valentine died as a martyr. And so when we look at Lupercalia, what we find is that this Roman feast was actually a bloody, violent, and sexually charged celebration. And it involved animal sacrifices where goats and even dogs were sacrificed. And it was also during this time where they would have this random matchmaking of various couples and hopes of warding off evil spirits and warding off infertility. That has nothing to do with Christianity at all. And there is no way that the church just thought of, well, we're just going to just take this Roman pagan festival and we're just going to Christianize it and baptize it. No, Lupercalia is a separate celebration altogether. And again, it was held on the 15th of February, and the 14th of February again was chosen because of the association of Valentine with his death on that day. Now, the person who really made Valentine's Day very famous and brought it into the West, primarily into England, was the English poet Geoffrey Chaucer, born in 1343, and he died in 1400. And so it really was with Chaucer, who wrote a poem in 1375, and in that poem, he talked about February 14th being the time when birds and humans couple together. That this was the time when birds would begin to couple and get ready to create their nests and lay their eggs and so forth. And so he associated February the 14th, and he did call it St. Valentine's Day. So Chaucer himself referred to the day as St. Valentine's Day, and he associated with love and romance and coupling. And so it's from this tradition that starts with Chaucer that you begin to see this overemphasis on romance and love on February the 14th. And it's out of this tradition that, of course, we have the creation of the Valentine's cards. And so since the time of Chaucer, the practice of keeping Valentine's Day to celebrate love and celebrate romance began to spread throughout England. And then, of course, as it spread toward out of England, it went into the Western world or the Anglo-speaking world, the Anglosphere, so to speak. And therefore, from the early to the mid 19th century, so this would be the early 1800s to the middle of the 1800s, we have the creation of Valentine cards. And so with the creation of Valentine cards and then getting your loved one flowers or getting them roses or candy in some cases or chocolates, this began to develop in England and then out into the English-speaking world. And so this really gets going, as I said, in the early 1800s to the middle of the 19th century, which would be around the 1850s. So we see how this developed from the martyrdom of a Christian saint who died for the cause of Christ, various interpretations of that. But from an early date, it was set at February the 14th as the date of the martyrdom of this person by the name of Valentine. Now, of course, today, as we know, in Western culture, Valentine's Day has become a profiting time, a time where big businesses profit tremendously. And some have even argued that Valentine's Day is second to Christmas in terms of profit and commercialism. And so today, Valentine's Day has become a very commercialized holiday. And of course, that's when the price of roses and various flowers are jacked up on Valentine's Day because everyone has to get flowers. And it's also the time when Valentine's Day cards come out in mass. And of course, you're paying more for the Valentine's cards. And so it becomes a very commercialized day, especially for florists and chocolate companies, candy companies, gift cards and greeting cards and so forth and so on. And so very much like Christmas, which began with the celebration of the birth of Christ, the secular world nabbed onto that and commercialized it. And so that Christmas today has become so commercialized that everything's about buying and getting gifts, and a lot of folks end up being in debt afterwards. Valentine's comes in second place in many regards. And so it is something that originally began with a Christian martyr. And as usual, the secular world that cares very little for the origins of these Christian people. They simply take this and they commercialize it. And as you will see on Valentine's Day, that's exactly what is happening. And so that is the history of the whole Valentine's Day celebration. And of course, I've had some people asked, well, should Christians celebrate Valentine's Day? Is it something we should avoid? Well, this is a gray area. This is an area that we would call we call it a diaphora, which has to do with disputable matters. And so in Romans 14, verse 5, Paul put it this way. He says, look, there's some people who regard one day holier than another, and there are others who hold every day the same and alike. And everyone should be convinced in their own mind. And so when it comes to the question of whether a Christian should celebrate Valentine's Day or not, it really is up to conscience. There's nothing wrong with celebrating love. There's nothing wrong with getting a loved one flowers. There's nothing wrong with doing any of these things. But from a Christian standpoint, every day should be Valentine's Day. Valentine's Day should be 365 days a year because husbands are called to love their wives as Christ loved the church, and wives are called to submit to their husbands as unto the Lord. And so Valentine's, ideally, you shouldn't have to wait for 1 day out of the year in February to express how much you love someone. Now, there's nothing wrong if you want to take your spouse or you want to take your date out on Valentine's Day for a lovely dinner, or you want to get flowers, and there's nothing wrong with that. But my point is that this should be something that should be recognized and should be done, not just once a year, but every day, actually. And therefore, whether as a Christian you want to observe it or not observe it, you're not sinning by observing it. You're not sinning by not observing it. And so it really is a gray area at the end of the day. And it's about showing love and care for people, which this world needs a lot of. So whether you keep Valentine's Day or observe it is entirely up to you. It's a gray area. And so Christians are not bound in this area. They are free to exercise their conscience. And so I hope that this brief video has been helpful and that it has enlightened you in some respects about the history of Valentine's Day. And we encourage, as always, people to like the video and to share the video. And we also encourage you, if you have not done so already, to subscribe to my channel, Toronto Apologetics. It's absolutely free, and we encourage you to share this video with others and share the channel with others, because we really want to get this information out there and we want to get people informed. So thank you again, everyone, and we'll see you next time. God bless. Take care. Bye for now.